Good morning. Hello, everyone. Good morning from sunny Istanbul side, and good morning, good afternoon for Asian side of the world. And today, as Adfimi, we are very happy and proud that we are again together with another seminar. It's called shortly a new normal in economy. As we all know very well that the Corona-19 virus affected all over the world, and it not only affected the health system, but also affected all the economy, of course, the global economy. Of course, we all know very well that coronavirus are very effective and very disruptive and harmful virus all over the world. So especially from our perspective, today we will look at this matter from the economic and global economic perspective. So just from the other perspective, we will look at this in the seminar from the comparing the two systems as a normal system and the new normal in the economy. Lots of the economy are trying to adjust themselves to new normal in their conditions, and also some of the economists allege that the returning to the new normal will be different shapes. Some of allege that it will be V-shape, the others U-shape, and others are W shapes. No matter that's the shape, but the important thing is that whatever it looks like, the normal looks like. After pandemic, it won't be able. It was before. It seems very well, very clear. So, in this perspective, the government's trying to respond to the virus, against the virus, from the different perspective, from different ways. Some governments are supporting the economies by cash. By postponing of the debts, postponing of the taxes, debts, and other things. Some governments prefer to direct the intervention to the economy by different ways, and so the models, there's not any soil or any unique model for all the economies. We have different models and different shape. Funding of the economy or funding of the step-by-step the special sectors in the market. So today we'll talk about the new normal and the normal and the new normal, and what will be in the future. And also after debt management, as I said before, that it seems that the government's intervention to the economy and the debt management system, and also it will be, it seems that very clear, decentralization system is becoming, it is approaching. So some of the authorities allege that the current system of the based on the regulation and the supervision authority controlling system are or in the back, and the near future, in the next time in the economic system will be based on the decentralization system, and it will be very independent, and so it want to be far away from the some of the regulation and supervision authority regulations. So it means that the next future will be very interesting and very I don't know how can I describe that new situation. So today we have, as I said before, that we have different speaker from the different sector and different perspective. So we would like to harmonize three different theses or the perspectives in this webinar. From the one perspective, and the first perspective, as I said, in the system, the government responding to the against the virus. How the governments look to this economic new normal system. We would like to talk about that government perspective to the new normal. So secondly, we will talk about the practice system in the market. So the very important general manager of one of the Turkish Islamic Bank will be together. And another perspective from the academic or university side, and one of the most important scholar from the university, Professor Mr. Bahattin Bey, Burhan Bey will be with us together. So firstly, I would like to start with Mr. Hakan Yurdakul, Dr. Hakan Yurdakul, and he's very important activist. He's very important expert in the government side. We would like to start with Mr. Hakan Yurdakul perspective to the new normal, but before his speech, I would like to introduce himself for you. Firstly, Mr. Hakan Yurdakul was born in Ankara in 2003. He graduated from the Ankara University, Department of the International Relations in 1995. He started his professional career in Istanbul. He held upper management position in finance and IT sectors. In 2005, he received MA degree from the Koç University. He worked actively in Eastern Europe, Gulf, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Turkish republics. He was appointed to the presidency of the Republic of Turkey, head of the economy monitoring and coordination in 2015. Then to the committee of the economic policy board board member in 2018. And lastly, to the public oversight, accounting and auditing authority board member. He took PhD degree in business administration with the thesis of evaluation of the future of the Turkish public partnership practices in the light of the worldwide impact and determinants analysis of the PPP projects in 2018. He is fluent in English and he has been a professional translator. He is married and has 2 children. So, Mr. Hakan Yurdakul, the ground is your place.
Accept the changing role of financial industry. This is the main issue that I would like to underline today's event, today's my presentation. So from that point, it may be better to remind a very short history of what happened after especially Second World War. As you know, the Bretton Woods system after Second World War, or at the end of the Second World War, was established in 1946 with USD pegged to the price of gold and suspended in 1971 by USA with devaluation of USD related to gold, then collapsed in 1973 when I was born. So this was a new world. What happened after that? Oil crisis began in that same year, and the oil prices quadrupled between 1973 and 1974 in 1 year only. Then financial industry boomed with floating freely USD supported by capital flow from oil-rich countries especially. So it was a milestone from economy history point of view, because first time in the history of humankind, the finance industry, the definition of value, I mean the added value, is not related with real things anymore. So this is a milestone. This is a very important milestone. And after that, the regulation of financial industry by time permitted banks to engage in hedge funds with derivatives and the other things as we experienced all together. And these things resulted with 28 global financial crises. And the inconsistency between economic facts, perceptions, and pretendings increased volatility, and invented cryptocurrencies as we experiencing today, and more complex derivatives made the inconsistency bigger and bigger and bigger, especially in the developed part of the globe and as a subject to developing part of the globe. And lastly, COVID-19 pandemic with lockdowns, economic lockdowns spread and resulted with quantitative easing executing by reserve currency owners. I mean the USD and the a bit euro. So they start to use their printing machines to print that valuable or valueless USD or euro papers briefly. So at that point of time, we have a problem. We have a problem started after 1973 about everything turned to a Ponzi scheme. This is a very important thing. So with the COVID-19 pandemic, what are the predictions that we have, that all have, and or threats about that new normal, called new normal? First of all, we know that loosely coupled or small-scale players will be boomed with the help of new technologies like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, 5G communication, 3D printers, big data, and that blockchain technology, etc., etc. So we are experiencing a decentralization, as if seemingly decentralization, let me say that. But those seemingly operating decentralized players will be led by intelligent big technology, finance, and industry giants, which means the scale is still something, but it's a hidden thing now, not unlike before. And by time, it's predicted that role of governments will be diminished with disappearing national borders by technology. You know that communication technology and the drone and the other 3D printer and the other technologies make the national borders meaningless to some extent. And also the global standards will act and acting the same role. I mean, regarding to disappearing the national borders, we are talking about one village, big village, having some global standards, and all the players, including the governments and the companies and the persons, should obey when we are talking about that global standards like gravity. But it's just a prediction, it's just an assumption. I would like to underline that issue. And fourth, efficiency and profitability of those big technology, finance, and industry giants will increase inequality and harm social security services and systems, and also public services because of no tax or very limited tax incomes. And the result is, of course, the unemployment. These are the predictions, bad predictions. And investing financing models will tend to quick wins and cheap closings. And of course, it will harm innovations and employment creation in real terms. So from that point of view, with those predictions and with the limited or will be limited role of government, we need, I believe in that, we need a new approach for investment financing instead of consumption and operating cost financing. So I'm just trying to emphasize that today, the finance industry, the main position of the finance industry is how to finance the consumption and the operating costs of the companies. That's so. But from an investment financing, real investment financing point of view, which create new production, growth, added value, employment, and at the end, happiness and the huzur, let me say, of mankind, we need a new approach because or else we will see the realization of those predictions. And what I am trying to talk is, it's all about equity financing versus debt financing. Now we are living in a world of debt financing, but we should take it to the equity financing for the happiness, for the wellness of the humankind, briefly. So the main problem from that point of view is the debt itself. Let me talk about some debt figures of OECD countries. You can see the current debt structure from private industry side, from government point of view, and the household point of view. We can see that in 2019, the private debt is 160 of GDP. I'm talking about those OECD countries, and the government debt is 68%, and the household debt, the last graphic I'm talking about, is 61. It's very high when we are talking about the debt. And why we are talking about debt? Debt can be used, I mean, the finance, this capital can be used for two different purposes. First, for financing the operating costs and the consumption, or we can use the same thing for new investments, production, and employment. So the problems from that point of view is, first, we are experiencing an increase in the total debt globally. I'm just talking about OECD countries, but it's a fact also about the globe, all countries. I mean, the debt to investment ratio is very low because, as I said before, the debt has been used for financing the consumption and the operating costs of the companies. And lastly, in that structure, in that mechanism, the weight of conventional banks are very high. I mean, based on interest and based on that short or mid-term debting structure. So what's the solution? It's also an answer to what the financial institutions should do regarding to re-engagement with real sector. We need some new tools and the products for finance industry about those re-engagements. First, we need some products and the tools about risk sharing with the investors, with the innovators, and with the guys, with the people believing in growing, real growing. I'm talking about real added value. And secondly, we should have some products and the tools for project funding, again, from investor point of view and from innovations point of view. And the crowdfunding is very important. For example, Turkey, regarding the number of investors, those cryptocurrencies is very high. And it shows the demand from the population side, some new investment tools regarding to how to invest their money, their savings, and so crowdfunding mechanisms. I'm not only talking about the current regulation called as the crowdfunding, but there will be some additional and new tools, new products regarding crowdfunding, and these will be very important. And lastly, the insurance structure should be used regarding to back those fundings from both company side and from the population side. So from my point of view, the solution is all about the finance industry's performance, about the future, as a reply to that new world still suffering with the very high debts, without a very limited investments and with a very limited employment creation. So these are the roles and the things that I believe in that the finance industry should do all over the world, including Turkey. So from that point of view, you know better than me, I am very sure, the Islamic finance is very important. I mean, because of the risk sharing base from a belief point of view. Also, the Islamic finance and Islamic finance institutions have some muscles and also responsibility to create, to innovate, and to execute these kind of products and tools. And this is the main things that we are accepting from the finance industry regarding that issue. Just because of that, we are talking, our president, Mr. Erdogan, is talking about the very high interest rates and the negative effects of those interest rates to investment and so export and production and employment. So this is the main role from my point of view that we are accepting from finance industry. So this is what I am talking about. I don't think finance institutions are in a reactive mode or a subject mode to react to that new normal called new normal with COVID-19 pandemic, but they have their own responsibilities and the power and the understanding and the basis from a historical point of view also to change the current debt-based structure of the finance industry, and they have a responsibility to re-engage the relation between the real sector and the finance industry. Briefly, finance industry is an industry to help the real sector to produce real added value for employment and for the wellness of the humankind. So this presentation is just a reminding and recall the original role of the finance industry. So that's all. Thank you.
Mr. Yudakal, thank you very much. It was very important presentation, and of course it is a very important and very useful presentation for us. Just one question from me. As I said in my opening speech, that decentralization approaching is becoming very popular nowadays after COVID virus. In the new normal terms, so the role of the government interventory position and the regulation and the supervisory authorities in the system, it's a conflict. I think it seems that there's a conflict between the centralization system and the regulatory supervisory authorities. And you also said in your presentation that the insurance system in the finance sector also very important. So the three different subjects and points are, I think it will be some problems in the future. What do you think about that issue?
Yes, there is, and there will be. First of all, I would like to underline that the so-called decentralization is a new kind of centralization. I believe in that. We are not talking in real terms. We are not talking about a decentralization or a freedom or something like that. We are talking about a new kind of centralization supported by especially technology, scale, and the knowledge, the tacit knowledge of how to develop new technologies. This is very important. And when we are talking about, with that point of view, we are talking about a differentiating share of government and the private industries. So I believe in that there is a very big conflict between private and industries, for example, like Amazon, okay, I'm talking about the big giants, okay, and the governments. Governments are following, governments are follower. And by definition, the main role of the governments are to protect, to establish a frame, then to protect the frame also. Sometimes by regulations, sometimes by power. Okay, this is the main case. And the main legitimacy of the government is coming from the definition of nation and the country and the borders. But when we are talking about those new technologies, we are talking about the 5G, we are talking about the big data, about to predict everything, to manipulate everything, a very big power I am talking about. We are now suffering a kind of situation that the national borders, as I said before, are disappearing and becoming meaningless and meaningless. So everybody in different countries are living in same standards, living in same rules, believing in same rules, and the cultural and the value-based differentiations are getting more and more cosmetic. That's all. So, for example, we are using this technology, we are wearing these things, we are accepting the GDP. With that calculation, we are not talking about, in fact, the wellness of humankind, something like that. Okay, the role of government, as I said before, and especially I am talking about the Turkish Republic, because we are not talking about, when we are talking about the government or state itself, we are not talking about a big organization. In fact, yes, there is a big organization. For example, I'm a part of that organization, but we are also talking about a very important and even very important concept of state. State is something from our point of view, is a something of thing, a shadow of God in the world. Okay, yes. And from that point of view, the main role of government as the main operator of the state, let me say that, is to proceed to execute what the population and what the people, millet, is accepting from the state, that holy concept I am talking about. This is the role of. But the most important part is the role of private industry. These are their own responsibility. I mean, from that role of sharing, the government will do everything. The government will settle everything and the government will protect everything and the private industry is just waiting to invest. This is not like that. They have also, I mean, the private industry all over the world also in responsibility of doing things in a correct way, which means they should really invest. I mean, from operating cost financing, they are not in a position to use their debt, okay, the debt they are collecting from all over the world because of the cheap USD or cheap euro, whatever, to finance their operating costs. They should think about the future of this country and the globe, okay, from all points of views. So the new normal emphasized, that new word emphasized the role and the responsibility of private industry. They are escaping for the last, let me say, 40, 50 years. They have no any other way to go out. Okay, this is the time they should do something, real things. The government is doing the right thing. I mean, protecting and setting up the frame and protecting the frame, but that's all. I mean, the main motivation regarding the growth, regarding the employment, should come from the private industry, not from the public industry. Okay, this is very important. This is what I understand from that sort of conflicting decentralization and decentralization thing. And we should more and more talk about the role and responsibility of private industry, including financial institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hakan Yurdakul, for your very wise, very important explanation about the centralization and decentralization approaching nowadays. And it was very, very useful, very helpful for us. Again, thank you very much for your participation for this webinar. We know that well, you are very busy, you are very hectic, but you shared your time with your very important time with us. Thank you very much. I appreciate very, very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you again inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, our second speaker is Mr. Melikşah Utku. And as I said, my opening speech that today we will speak about the new normal, about different perspective. And now that we will look at the new normal from the banking practices perspective, and also we shortly call it as practice methods and what's happening in practice in the market, especially in the banking sector. And now our second speaker is Mr. Melikşah Utku, and I would like to introduce Mr. Melikşah for you. And let me please, Mr. Utku. And Mr. Utku was born in Ankara in 1968. He graduated from the Mechanical Engineering Department of the Boğaziçi University in 1999. Completed his graduate studies in London School of Economy in 1992, and master's degree on economic development in Marmara University, Istanbul, 1998. In 2004, he served as a consultant to general manager of Albarka Türk. In 2016 to 2006-2007, he was the head economist in the Albarka Türk. In addition, he was an economist columnist for Yeni Şafak newspaper for over 10 years. He later worked as investor relations manager between 2007-2009. He continued as CIO, Assistant General Manager, in December 2009, and was appointed as CFO, primarily responsible for financial affairs, budget and financial reporting, and corporate communication departments. He was a board member of Borsa Istanbul from 2013 to 2016. Since October 2016, Mr. Utku has been serving as the general manager of Albarka Türk, and he currently serves as the chairman of the board of the Bereket Asset Leasing Company, Albarka Portfolio Management Company, and Albarka Culture, Art, and Publishing Company, as well as the deputy chairman of the Katılım Pension and the Life Company. He is member of the Executive Committee, Credit Committee, and the chairman of the IT Governance Committee. Mr. Melikşah Utku, please, the ground is yours.
Thank you very much. We are living in a world. Let me just share my presentation also.
Of course.
All right. You can see it, right? We're we're now living in a world that is so complex and it's changing so fast that uh, as banks, we don't know what to do, to be honest. It is changing so fast, and the dynamics include not just technology, but as you know, pandemic, political and economic issues also. These are all affecting the way we are doing business and the way we're looking at the future also. In a way, we all know that banking is basically some kind of platform, some kind of agency that provides or brings together the savers and the people who need those savings for investment purposes or for consumption purposes. But whether these platforms, these agencies need to be banks is a major question going forwards. And we have seen that during the pandemic, that things can change very easily, very fast, if people are given the opportunity or the conditions allow those opportunities to grow very fast. For example, we saw that during the pandemic, we had the infrastructure to work from remotely. The call centers of the people who are giving the credits, even the marketing people could connect from their homes and sell their products to the customers. And the customers also had the opportunity and the infrastructure to work from their homes, to do their banking transactions from their homes, but they never did it. People have cultural traits or things they're used to doing, and they don't change it that fast unless the conditions force them to do that. And the pandemic has done that in a very effective manner. Before the pandemic, one of the main KPIs or targets in banks were digital migration. Trying to push their customers to use their digital platforms because it's cheaper, obviously, than opening up branches and serving them physically at the branches. But it was very hard, and we used to give KPIs to our branches to enforce them, to incentivize them so that they would help with that digital migration. But the pandemic, that little virus that we haven't seen, but has affected us all, has done that in a very, very short time, within a few months, actually. So things are changing, and unless we control that change or be able to utilize that change, we are surely going to be outdated, obsolete in a very short time. We have seen that in many sectors, actually. I mean, Amazon has almost, yeah, I mean, I used to say they had no stores, but now they have stores, so almost no stores. Uber has no cars of its own. Alibaba doesn't have inventories. Facebook doesn't create its own content. It just utilizes the content of the people. Airbnb doesn't have any real estates. Bitcoin doesn't have any physical coins. And Netflix is not a TV channel. So why are banks still with branches? Why are banks still trying to do things the old-fashioned way? And that doesn't fully incorporate that Internet of Things are coming in. It's coming in very fast, and it will mean that what does Internet of Things mean? It could mean that people or the things that are initiating a transaction on both sides, and the counterparties need not be people. They could be machines that could initiate any transaction based on certain algorithms, AI-based functions. And these transactions could also include banking transactions. So We haven't fully seen that coming into the banking sector yet. But when that comes in, obviously, we will be facing with an environment where your customers are not necessarily people. So how does customer experience work in that scenario? We know that there are a lot of challenger banks coming in. None of them are actually making money. They're not all profitable, but they're getting more capital nowadays, new capital injections nowadays than normal banks, conventional banks are getting. So it is interesting that people are actually trusting the growth and the potential of these new challenger banks. And so it is important to for the banks themselves to position themselves within this changing environment. The market shares of these fintechs is growing, obviously, over the recent years, and I think there could be an exponential growth going forwards. Obviously, over the last couple of years, the impact of pandemic has taken its toll on the banking, and the growth has helped with the growth of the payment companies, especially because you do not want to deal with cash anymore, and also fintechs in many areas. We have many fintechs that are working in our accelerator or that we have invested in. And we have seen that they did a pretty good job of growing their business during this pandemic period, unlike many of the conservative or traditional businesses during the pandemic. They are raising a lot of funds, and especially with regards to payment mechanisms, but also other areas of finance is also growing, like insurtech, mortgage finance, and B2B payments. So what do that? What we also have big techs that is a major challenger for the conventional banks. They have a huge retail customer base that is easy for them to tap and bring in new products. They have all their operations digitalized, so they can easily scale without too much additional investment. They can utilize the data that they collect, and they collect data from almost any transaction, any mouse click that the customer does. They collect that data and they can utilize it much better than banks can. And they can also utilize the opening up of banks. So they can utilize the functions provided by banks through their APIs. So big techs are definitely even a more larger competitor for the banks themselves. And many of the bank CEOs are actually finding big techs very disruptive. They are seeing them as competitors, while the fintechs are a little bit more on the friendlier side, because banks feel that they can utilize them, they can work together and collaborate with fintechs. And we are seeing many banks actually participate in the fintech ecosystem. So the first thing that we are seeing is obviously the first reaction of the banks is first of all, they're opening up. What does opening up mean? From a technical perspective, it means that they are opening their systems so that fintechs and customers directly actually could utilize the functions provided by banks through their systems by using APIs. They can provide many of the services that may not be able to, that a small fintech may not be able to provide, but by the support of a bank, they can easily gain access to a lot of regulatory functions that are within the limits, the constraints of the regulation. So it is important for fintechs for using these banking systems And this has been a main driver for banks and fintech partnerships going forwards. Obviously, banks also provide an incubation or acceleration platforms. They invest in these fintechs, either by portfolios or through internal venture funds. They partner with them and they acquire them, and they also provide environments within their own workspaces for their staff to bring up new fintechs. So that we now have a very fintech-friendly ecosystems in many of the leading banks in the world. This means a major change from a technical perspective with regards to how they do business internally also. Previously, especially the IT teams, had the very legacy systems. And it was changing a legacy system was a huge concern for banks. It required huge budgets. Sometimes, and many times actually, they failed. And it was all utilized internally. Now that is changing. No one's working on the legacy system anymore. They're opening up they're not touching the core banking system. They're building platforms on top of the core banking systems, the legacy systems, and they're opening up those platforms to, like I said, the fintechs, their customers, and sometimes other banks. So we are seeing the way that technology is handled internally within the banks is also changing. Obviously, like I said in the beginning, COVID has changed the way the acceleration of this trend. We are seeing a larger and larger portion of the payments going through digital channels, and some not necessarily all through fintechs rather than the digital platforms, channels of the banks themselves. Cash usages are falling down definitely very fast, and especially in some mature markets, we are seeing a sharp reduction, especially with regards to utilization or using of cash directly. There is still a very diverse spectrum of countries which are using different types of payment methods, as you can see. But over time, in all the countries, in all the continents, we are seeing a sharp increase on mobile payments sides, so that we will be seeing banks giving more attention and investing in these areas. The initial reaction of the banks to COVID was obviously closing of the branches, but they had to keep the services open somehow. So many allowed, first of all, for working outside the bank, especially through digital or outside the bank channels like WhatsApp, like Zoom, and other channels were first used by banks because they don't like using systems that are open and in the cloud because of regulation, because of information security reasons. But it was the first time that banks had to use systems that weren't within their control. They also allow for larger limits for especially contactless payments. Interestingly enough, the regulatory constraints were loosened very fast, in a very fast manner during this period. The things that have been waiting on the agenda of the regulators for some time, like working remotely, the draft was already there, but it was still in the benches. No one took it up and legalized it. Also, things like digital onboarding, they came in very fast over these last couple of years. The labor regulations concerning working from home, remote working, and digital onboarding, we still are very concerned with regards to making sure that the customer is who he says he is, because we require the signatures and things like that. Those are all changing very fast now. The regulatory is also changing the way that they are looking at these things. So this pandemic has made a huge difference with regards to how things are being done. And interestingly enough, banks who are actually very conservative with regards to their hierarchy organizations are now thinking differently. We are seeing that it is cutting costs very fast. We are seeing the increases in efficiency very fast in many areas. Call centers, for example, have been very effective with regards to people working from their homes. Otherwise, we had to have 7/24 shifts of people always trying to bring them here in the call centers. But now because people can work from their homes, that problem of arranging for shifts has become a much easier job for banks, and efficiencies in many areas, especially IT projects, have increased radically during this period. And banks, even after the pandemic, I don't think many will require a major portion of their workforce to return back to home to work. So we are seeing work from home as a new method that is here to stay in the banking sector. Customer behavior has changed. Like I said, they are able to now carry out more complex transactions online. Even the elderly has been able to adapt to this new environment. And banks are more eager to bring in new products, additional products to their mobile and digital channels, like giving a credit, even giving complex instruments like letters of credit, letters of guarantee through these digital channels. Instead of a broad branch network, we are seeing that it is possible to reach to the customers through digital means, by video conferencing, by things like WhatsApp and other messaging tools. That is allowing the banks to actually cut costs with regards to physical branches. And it's also changing the way that we are interacting. We are actually, for example, thinking of providing platforms that will integrate into the customers' accounting systems, which will allow the transaction to be done at the same time that we are talking with the customer through a video conference, for example. And like I said, reduced travel arrangements. If physical infrastructures need to change, we have seen that during this pandemic. We don't need larger roads. We don't need cars anymore that much. What we need is more broadband, internet infrastructure, for example. That has become a much more important now than the roads for new cars, for example. As Al Baraka Turk, obviously, we have invested greatly in the fintech environment. We have our own fintechs. We have an accelerator in the bank we call Al Baraka Garage. We have invested in these fintechs. One good thing about accelerators in the banks is that these fintechs have allowed, have certain constraints, certain barricades, or that they need to, barriers that it's very hard for them to pass. One is especially having references. You know, as banks, we don't, in the past, we didn't allow a company with no history to provide services for us, for example. We required letters of guarantee, we required a certain experience. But when we had this garage, these people with their projects came in and tried out their products on us, actually. And we were eager to work with them. And they, when they finished their product, they actually had a good reference of having worked with Al Baraka, proved their concept in Al Baraka, when they came out to the world to sell and market their products. And like Dr. Hakan said, we are now risk sharing with these fintechs. We are a bank that had a risk sharing culture in the past. We had what we called musharaka projects, but in the past we used to do them in real estate projects, large real estate projects. Now we are converting to utilize them in areas in startups, in especially fintech startups, and it's starting to pay off, obviously. Many things, obviously, the mentality of risk sharing is much different than the mentality of giving a loan, giving a credit. When you give a credit, you worry when the guy does not pay you back. But when you're risk sharing, you start worrying from the day one. You are a partner in that investment. You have to know that your partner is giving his best effort. He's not shirking you. He's giving you all the real numbers. So that very concept is a different mentality. I think a major cultural shift is still required in banks. The technology side, they can easily adapt to, but the cultural shift is going to take much longer time with regards to banks. If they can do it, I think they can easily adapt to the new normal and even lead the new normal. But if they cannot, and we will see major resistances in many of the larger banks because they cannot shift that culture, then they will have problems in the future. With that, I'm open to obvious questions, and thank you very much.
Mr. Meksha Utku, thank you very much for this very important presentation and very important information. And also, I understand that as Mr. Hakan said, that the risk sharing system is becoming very popular in the new normal, and in the practice in the banking sector will change, or we'll see the new change in the future in the new normal. And one of things is that I think it was the risk sharing financial system. And you are, as Albarca is one of the most important participant of this system, or pioneer, pioneer of this system. Mr. Utku, there's a question, a short question for you. If you have a short time, if you have a time, could you please answer that question? In this question, it says that in the new normal, fintech companies are challenging the banks. Do you think fintechs will replace the banks in the future? Yeah, that's the question. Question that it was also, I was wondering that about that fintechs, the relation between the fintechs and in the future, and the fintechs role in the banking system in the new normal in the future. Please, ground is yours.
I was actually, I had started typing an answer to that, but it's easier to answer it vocally.
Very short, yeah, very short.
Yeah, I mean, they have the potential to replace banks, definitely. And I believe some banks will be replaced in certain geographies. But many banks, like I said, are adopting ways to work with these fintechs. They are investing in them, they're partnering with them, they're opening up their systems to them, and they are sometimes acquiring them. And they are also, many banks are also building their own fintechs. So I think there will be a period where there will be a lot of collaboration, competition, cooperation between fintechs and traditional banks. We will see a change in the landscape in the financial industry, but I don't think they will fully replace the banks. There will be an amalgamation, a joining up of these fintechs with the traditional banks, because the banks have the muscle power. They have the resources to enable these fintechs to grow. The major issue is not fintechs per se, but the big techs, larger corporations like Amazon, Facebook, and Apple can provide financial services easily, and they can easily find the network without the overhead costs that the banks are now bearing, especially until regulation requires them to hold a certain capital, abide by certain rules. They will easily gain ground and market share with regards to financial services. So I think the main competition could come rather from big techs rather than fintechs themselves, because banks are looking at ways to deal with fintechs, and we will see a joining up of forces in the fintech area. But like many banks will obviously lose ground too if they cannot manage that transition.
Thank you, Mr. Melikşah Utku, for your information and for your sharing your very important, very valuable time with us by participating in this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hope to see you again. Thank you. Thank you. Now, our third speaker, our last speaker, but definitely not least speaker, is Mr. Burhan Uluyol. Mr. Burhan Uluyol is from the university, from the academic perspective. We will discuss with Burhan Uluyol about the perspective of the new normal from the academic, from the university, from the scholar perspective, and also ideologically or ideally, what's the university, what's the academic sector thinks about the new normal in the economy. Thank you, Mr. Burhan Uluyol. And before Mr. Uluyol's speech, shortly I would like to introduce Mr. Uluyol to all participants. And Dr. Burhan Uluyol, or known as Erhan Saiti. Sorry for my bad pronunciation, Mr. Burhan. Sorry, Burhan, you are unmute. I think your voice position is unmute. I think. Could you change it to mute position?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mr. Burhan Uluyol, or known as Burhan Saiti, is an associate professor at the Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University and recipient of the Outstanding Young Scientist Award by Turkey Academy of Sciences, 2018-2021. Previously, he was associate assistant professor and senior lecturer at the International Islam University Malaysia and University Kuala Lumpur, respectively. As a young academician, he has published 4 books, 11 book chapters, almost 55 Scopus ISE indexed journal publications, and attended more than 45 international and local conferences. He was awarded by the IIUM for publishing highest number of articles in station indexed journals in social science category in year 2017. He is named for top 1% reviewer in years 2018 and 2019 by Pablons. His research interest is the empirical studies of Islamic banking and finance. So, Mr. Burhan Uluyol, the ground is yours, please.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum and good morning to everyone. I would like to thank for the moderator as well as the two, what they call the prestigious speakers as well. They are from industry. I think is my presentation may be more close to Dr. Hakan's presentation because he mentioned the importance of the real sector. What they call is like, and also he mentioned about the equity financing and the debt financing and so on and so forth. So today I would like to highlight how we can, as academic, how we can offer some suggestion for the new normal economy actually. And also, Mr. Melikşah also, and he mentioned, what they call after virus, what will be our direction actually, and how we can, what they call move and together, moving forward. I mean, in terms of, the banking sector and so on and so forth. So actually I'm also what they call is I'm doing some research in Islamic finance as well. So unlike Islamic stock indexes, and also Islamic banking and takaful, Islamic social finance, and so on and so forth. So anyway, today also I would like to link my presentation with Dr. Hakan's presentation, how we can finance the institution to adopt the new normal present economy. That will be, my title also very close to, what they call the Adfimi's, what they call the theme of the this webinar actually. Okay, so there is what they call is the Baka and the Morocco and 2018, and they argued that in order to fund the development infrastructure, most of the Muslim countries suffer from external debt. Okay, even though those countries need a substantial development infrastructure, however, they cannot fund them domestically because of inadequate resources. And therefore, this government often borrow from foreign countries or international financial institutions. So the borrowing country and face what they call is very numerous of the challenges, such as the fluctuation of the home currency. That's what's happening in Turkey as well, while borrowing denominated in the foreign currency. So leverage and economic fluctuation of the country, increase because of such borrowing. And that is also in the case of Turkey as well. So those countries and they face commodity price and the vulnerability due to the heavy reliance on commodity exports. I think this is not in the case of Turkey, but this is in the case of some OIC countries and who's exporting their oils as well. So they argued that there is an innovation of the Islamic bond or the sukuk and can reduce such external borrowing or such leverage and the vulnerability. Okay, so that is the argument. So what is under sukuk? Islamic version of the bond, or it is under debt, or it's under partnership, or it is rental. So many people is confused. It is just, debt is debt. But it can be based on the partnership base, just now as Dr. Hakan has mentioned, it can be based on equity financing, or it can be based on the rental, or it is just simply debt. So this will be, some what they call is the argument regarding the sukuk. But to me, what they call is, either it is under debt or partnership, or it is rental based, is depending on the underlying contract. Okay, underlying contract for the sukuk. So meaning that sukuk can be categorized into 3 different categories. One of them will be sale based. Another one will be partnership based, and another one will be service based, for example. I think if it is based on the sale based, then it is very similar to that. Okay, very similar to that. But if it's based on the partnership, then like mudaraba or musharaka, partnership and the contract, it can be based on the partnership. Okay, or it is, what they call based on the wakala, it can be like service based, the sukuk and so on and so forth. So this is, the categories of the sukuk. So we try to look at, what they call is this structure is applied in Malaysia. Okay, also I call this one controversial structure. Okay, controversial structure. Why I call this one, what they call is a controversial and the structure. And what they call, this is, let's say, the party who wants to issue the sukuk. Or, okay, it can be government, or it can be corporate. Then they will transfer asset to the SPV. Then the SPV issue the sukuk, and the sukuk will be sold to the investors. Then they receive the payment. Then, what they call payment for acquisition, because the transfer asset to the SPV, now they make the payment. So after that, Mudarib will be paid the lease payment. Okay, then after that, what will happen? The SPV, distribute their project payment as like a rental profit or like something like the coupon. Okay, so originator, what they call is a redeem, they pay the redemption sum to redeem back the asset. So the problem is here, okay, because they will sell the asset, but they buy back the asset at maturity. So meaning that even though this is, look like Bay Al Ina, this is very popular and structured in Malaysia, either in what they call is government sukuk, or in the central bank when they want to issue the sukuk. This is what they call is one of the, controversial and structure, but this is accepted by Malaysian Malaysian authorities actually. So meaning that they will sell the asset, but they buy back the asset at the majority. That's why Taqi Osmani is claimed that they are more than 80% of the sukuk are non-Sharia compliant because of this, repurchase obligation from the originator. So meaning that, their intention is not to sell the asset. The intention is to borrow from, from the investors. So that's why I think this is, I call controversial and the structure. This is the problematic and the structure. So what Malaysian government did, for example, based on this structure, government of Malaysian sukuk. As you know, everyone, I think, as you know, there is a financial crisis in 1998. So most of the, South Asian countries, they borrow from, IMF, like Thailand, Indonesia, or some, Cambodia or some other countries, they borrow from IMF. Until today, they are paying the debt to IMF as well. But that time, only the country they didn't borrow from IMF, International Monetary Fund, is Malaysian government. Then how they escaped from the crisis, okay, there was, and the first and the sovereign sukuk by Malaysian government known as Malaysian Global Sukuk, for example, issued of the sum of 600 million with majority 2007. So meaning that they didn't borrow from IMF, but they borrow from public. So based on the sale contract, okay, Sukuk provided undivided ownership of the 4 land of the parcel that has been put in the trust. So meaning that government sell, the land, to the, what they call is the investors. The land parcel is sold by the government to SPV, then leased back to the government for what they call is return for semi-annual lease payment. So meaning that government sell the land, but still paying the rental to the investors. So meaning that the government is by using this 4 land of the parcel and raise and 600 million to finance, the government. That is what they call is first, sovereign sukuk or the government sukuk issued by Malaysian government in 2001. Okay, so now we try to look at sukuk al-ijara. Okay, in the ijara structure, the Mudarib began with the establishment of SPV. Then the SPV issued the sukuk for the investors and used the proceeds to buy the asset from vendor and the manufacturer. You may start, and what's the differences between the previous one? I will, look at this structure. This is called the accepted structure. Okay, accepted structure. Similar to the previous structure, but this one is accepted structure. Just not the one I mentioned. This one will be the controversial and structure. So this one will be what they call is accepted structure. So in accepted structure, why? The company, for example, or the government. Let's say the real intention is to buy and something from the manufacturer, but they don't have the money to buy and this and from the vendor. So what will they do? They also set up the SPV. Okay, SPV, issue the sukuk to buy this asset from from the manufacturer. So they will make the payment. Then SPV will buy what they call is this the asset from manufacturer. Then the lease to the company. Okay, so in this structure there is no like and sell and the buyback structure. The company's intention is to buy this asset. Okay, so ask the sukuk holders to buy this asset from manufacturer. So that's why we call this one accepted structure. Okay, accepted structure. So meaning that after that, the company will be paid the project payment to the SPV, and the SPV, what they call is, distribute the profit to the sukuk holders. So this one will be what they call is accepted and the structure. This one I call, very similar, but this one sell the asset and the buyback. Okay, so intention is not to sell the asset. Intention is what they call is just raise the money. But in this structure, I mean, the intention of the company to buy what they call this, I mean, the vendor or the manufacturer, I mean, the asset from the manufacturer or from the vendor. So this is, I mean, called typical ijara-based sukuk structure. So that is the even though very similar structure, but that small differences make huge and the differences. I think this is, I mean, one. Now, the application of the sukuk, I mean, what they call is Turkish banking system. I think according to some of my research, in order to issue the list certificate, it's necessary to establish VKŞ, yani Vakf Kiralama Şirketi. Okay, that serves and this purpose. So after establishment of the VKŞ, the issuance of the process will be started. So the operation of the process describing step by step as following. For example, let's say participation bank. In Turkey also, let's say, I think just now also, I mean, in their presentation is mentioned, like, I mean, participation banks, for example, they need to establish what they call VKŞ or SPV. I mean, this structure is very similar to the second structure I mentioned just now, like one by one. Okay, the second structure or acceptable and structure. So meaning that, let's say participation bank, they need to buy something from the asset from the vendor, for example, then they need to establish VKŞ. Okay, then VKŞ is what they call distribute, I mean, or kira certificate to the investors. Then investor will be buy the kira certificate. Then, I mean, using this money, I mean, VKŞ buy asset from manufacturer. Then they will give to the participation bank. Then participation bank, they have to distribute the profit. Then, I mean, SPV distribute, I mean, the what they call money to the sukuk investors. So at maturity, what they call, when the participation bank able to buy this asset from what they call VKŞ, they will buy the asset. Then what they call, they will, I mean, distribute, I mean, their principal amount or their face values to the sukuk investors. So this is, I mean, according to my basic research, I mean, what this is what is practiced by what we call is participation banks in Turkey. Now, I think I don't want to read this one one by one. Okay, I think this is, and I already explained in the structure. Now, in the case of the sovereign sukuk, okay, just now also what they call it, Dr. Hakan is mentioned, government cannot issue the stocks. As we know, I mean, the government cannot issue the stocks. Companies can issue stocks or they can issue the bond, but unfortunately, government cannot issue the stocks, only borrow the debt based on the conventional and the bond. So, I mean, in this problem, again, that is debt. Okay, then, I mean, the level of the debt is increasing. So is there any way to issue partnership based on the contract rather than borrow based on interest bearing and the debt or borrow from foreign countries? So meaning that this is, I mean, one of my contribution in this presentation. So meaning that government cannot issue the stocks, but they issue partnership based on the contract rather than they borrow, I mean, based on interest bearing debt or they borrow from other countries. So I think what they call, let me see this one, like partnership based sukuk, for example. This is the basic idea. Let's say the government has the land, okay, then sukuk holders, for example, they can what they call providing the fund. I mean, what they call is here, the most important thing here is what they call is the partnership between government and sukuk holders. Let's say like Marmara Canal or Istanbul Canal, for example. I mean, government need money for that. Now, the land is belong to the government. So government can give the land and sukuk holders, they can give the money. Then if any profit, I mean, what they call share between the government and the sukuk holders. If any loss, also it can be shared by sukuk holders and the government. Or, I mean, more specifically, let me explain what they call is as some example. Or I call this one what they call is convertible istisna mudaraba sukuk. Let's say the government can estimate how much the money need to fund this project. Okay, how much need to fund this project, or meaning that let's say first 3 years that we call as the construction period. During the construction period, I mean, what they call this project need the money, meaning that the investor, they need to supply some money in the first 3 years. So meaning that, okay, meaning that then after completion period, the project is able to generate some money. Then if able to generate some money, then I mean this profit, what they call is can be shared by with the government and the sukuk holders. Then end of the 10 years, I mean it can be like public listed company, what they call is through the initial public offering. Let me explain again one by one. Okay, why I call this one convertible istisna mudaraba sukuk. Istisna meaning that this and for 3 years construction period. I mean they can build, I mean this construction. Then after that, this one mudaraba, sharing the profit between government and the sukuk holders. Then end of the 10 years, I mean they have option to convert sukuk into stocks. Okay, so that's why we call convertible, what they call is mudaraba sukuk. Let's look at this one. Okay, I mean the insurance process will be like this. Okay, like this. For example, in the in stage 1, year 1 to year 3, for example, government pledge the asset, okay, and establish the SPV, okay, SPV. Then they can issue like mudaraba sukuk. Then sukuk holders providing the money to the project. Okay, then the project, I mean the SPV, then the underlying asset will be land and what they call seed fund or like some initial fund by the government. Okay, provided by the government. Then I mean sukuk holders purchase. Then the project financing. Then I mean what they call the financing the project. So in the first 3 years. Then after like stage 2 will be like year 2 to year 10. Now is revenues generated. Okay, so meaning that when the project is able to generate the profit, okay, able to generate the profit, that it can be shared by between government and the sukuk holders. Okay, dividend, I mean as a profit sharing agreement, government shares based on profit sharing agreement. I mean from year 2 until year 10. Then after like end of the year 10, I mean what they call, it can be like public listed company by issuing IPOs. Okay, IPOs. So meaning that, okay, meaning that sukuk holders, they have, I mean, 2 options. They can convert sukuk into what they call is the stocks, or they can get back the cash. And here also government also same. If I mean what they call is if they want to convert the sukuk into the what they call is the stocks, or they can get back there and the cash. So meaning that it become public listed company after like 10 years later. So after the post IPOs, then in the stock exchange, then I mean what they call shareholders, they will receive annual dividend, and the government also will receive annual dividend. So this is, I mean, something called convertible istisna mudaraba sukuk. Okay, mudaraba sukuk. So first 3 years, I mean what they call is they can, I mean they need some what they call is the construction period. So this period, I mean the sukuk holders can supply the fund. So this period they can share the profit between government and the sukuk holders. Okay, so this is, I mean, some proposal from academia. And but there will be some issues and the challenges of the sukuk. I think just now also Dr. Haqqan is mentioned. I think the high interest rate, okay, high interest rate, that is, I mean, burden to what they call is, I mean, when you want to issue sukuk in Turkey. So meaning that, I mean, sorry, I agree with, I mean, what they call is also president of the Turkey. I think, I mean, as you know, for example, in Malaysia, for example, interest rate is 3% or 5%, but the sukuk is giving 6% return. All the people investing in the sukuk. Okay, all the investor investing on the sukuk. But unfortunately in Turkey, 19% interest rate. How we want to issue the sukuk? That is another problem as well, because this is how high interest rate is hurting the economy. So that's why, let's say, if let's say interest rate is 8% in Turkey, for example, or 10% in Turkey, but Sukuk is giving 13% return, for example, then of course, then is investor willing to invest in the Sukuk. So that's why there will be high interest rate. One of the problem, and also exchange rate volatility as well for foreign investors. Okay, let's say the foreign investor investing in the, if it is what they call is denominated US denominated Sukuk, then because we need to convert that money into Turkish lira, then when we pay, then we will pay in dollar. So this will be another issues for the foreign investors as well. So this is some issues and the challenges when we want to issue the Sukuk. And also the Islamic scholars who oppose Bay Alina believe that the contract is like planned agreement, which is created by the parties by themselves. So meaning that there is no, a commitment to sell something, they just end up raising some money.
So today we have ended another webinar. I would like to thank all of our participants and for their valuable contribution to this webinar. Thank you very much for all of attendees for this seminar and for our participation. Thank you very much and hope to see you in another webinar. Thank you.